Hello class, this is Mrs. Paradis. So recently in class we've been talking a lot about the causes of the Cold War in the United States. Today we're going to start getting into some of the consequences of the Cold War and the impact that had on the American population. So what I'm going to be talking about in this brief video is McCarthyism and how that affected the United States population. So this is just a Prezi slide that I created to talk about this topic. Like all of the other presentations that we do in class, there's going to be a link to this on the class website, so if you want to take a look at that on your own, you can look at that. But right now I'm just going to go through it together with you guys through this video. So McCarthyism. So what is McCarthyism and where did that come from is an important thing to go over. So Joseph McCarthy is where the word McCarthyism originates from. So who was he? He was a Republican senator from Wisconsin from 1947 until his death in 1957. McCarthy made claims that there were large numbers of communist and Soviet spies and communist sympathizers within the United States government and elsewhere. So these claims brought a lot of anxiety and fear to the United States public because you have to understand at this time the Cold War is going on. So America is in an active war against communism. And the idea that these communists have infiltrated the United States government is really something that makes the American people afraid. So the term McCarthyism was coined in reference to McCarthy's practices. His practices have often been compared to the Salem witch trials. So think that kind of level of paranoia where anyone can be a witch. It's the same sort of with McCarthyism. Anyone can be a communist, that sweet old lady across the street, your neighbor who you've known for 20 years, it could be anyone. So because of that sort of like paranoia and how he was accusing people without solid evidence, he was eventually censored by the US Senate. He was allowed to maintain his position as a senator, but he was no longer able to make any public speeches. He kept his job as a senator for 2 years until he died. So here's just some definitions for you of McCarthyism. So the first is the practice of making accusations of disloyalty, especially of pro-communist activity, in many instances unsupported by proof or based on slight, doubtful, or irrelevant evidence. And the second definition is the practice of making unfair allegations or using unfair investigation techniques, especially in order to restrict dissent or political criticism. So what was the outcome of these McCarthy trials? Who were the victims and what were the consequences? So one of the big consequences was the blacklist. So a blacklist was basically a list of people who were suspected of engaging in communist activities or being communist sympathizers. Hollywood was specifically targeted by the blacklist. So a lot of actors, actresses, screenwriters, people who even just made music for movies were listed on the blacklist. So people, once they were on the blacklist, a lot of people lost their jobs, and it was very difficult for them to find another job after that. They were shunned by society and, in some cases, by their own family, and they were often forced into hiding or seclusion just because people didn't want to be associated with them and because of the hate that they were receiving. So some people were offered an opportunity to clear their name, but it was a long and drawn-out process, and honestly, for most, it wasn't worth the effort. So some notable names of people who were blacklisted include Langston Hughes, who you've probably heard about in your English classes, Charlie Chaplin, who is a pretty well-known actor, Harry Belafonte, who is also an actor, Lucille Ball, who is the main actress in I Love Lucy, and even Helen Keller didn't escape criticism. So this is just a quote from Joseph McCarthy that was sort of the beginning of him going after communists. He said, "I have here in my hand a list of 205 people that were known to the Secretary of State as being members of the Communist Party and who nevertheless are still working and shaping the policy of the State Department. So that's sort of that level of paranoia that I was talking about earlier, that, there's 205 people who are members of the Communist Party who are working in the United States government. Imagine today it would be like somebody saying that there's 205 people working in the United States government who are members of the Taliban. Think that sort of level. Alright, so now we're going to get to the assignment. So there was a lot of backlash against McCarthyism after he sort of revealed himself that, he didn't really have the substantial proof to back up what he was saying. So this is an example of a political cartoon right here that I just found, and it's basically a couple of army officials who are stalking out a Girl Scout camp, and the guy's reading a book that's, how to detect witchcraft. And in the back, that flag has a picture of McCarthy's face on it. So what I want you guys to do is to search for a political cartoon online that's connected to McCarthyism. When you find the cartoon, analyze it and write no more than a page summarizing the message the cartoon is trying to convey. In your summary, I want you to tell me if you think the cartoon is effective or not. You guys are going to be submitting this online to my email, and be sure to include a link to the cartoon either in the email or in your paper itself. Alright guys, if you have any questions about anything, give me an email, and be sure to have this done by class tomorrow because we're going to be discussing our cartoons in class. Alright everyone, have a good night.